And so a big part of that is, what's your purpose,
What's your
right?
purpose?
And in a work context or in a business context, you could have a business purpose, and that's who you are in business. It doesn't have to define you. But you can have a different purpose with your family, for instance, with your community. But these are all aspects of who you are, right? And the more of yourself that you know about, and more of yourself that you can bring to what you do in work and your business, just the better you're going to be able to be effective in the
Yeah.
what.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lorne Rubis, and welcome to Culture Talks, where we talk to next gen leaders who are helping take on the world's nastiest problems, advancing humankind, and creating better workplaces. And we're thrilled to have Rafe Furst, distinguished entrepreneur, crypto champion, poker champion, author, now best-selling author, dad of three, wonderful human being, reasonable mentor. We both have an opportunity to have met through the Unreasonable group, where Rafe is a cherished mentor and now has the best-selling book on Amazon that is entitled "The Future of Venture Capital: How to Win the VC Game and Create a Positive." We'd like to welcome your gardeners as well. We're happy to have them.
I know I should have put my mic on mute, but there we are.
It's so great to see you. Thanks for the big smile. Hey, Florida, Houston, you have, I know you're a sports guy. How'd you feel at the end?
I was rooting for Florida primarily because my 12-year-old son had Florida winning the bracket.
Okay, there you go. What a game, huh? It was quite.
It was a great game. We watched it as a whole family, actually, all five of us.
Yeah, there are a lot of memorable moments. We've done that too as a family, where we watch the championship game together and something eventful happens, right? So, hey, I'd be remiss without, just the fortuitous or unfortuitous, depending on how you look at a situation we're in with the tariffs and everything else. I just want to, you've got so much wisdom on this. What's your take on what the hell's going on from your perspective? As you're sitting back and taking a look, and then we'll get into more stuff about things we can share with leaders and founders and others. But what's just your Rafe's general take on this situation?
Well, I mean, I think from my systems level view of what's going on is, this is not my original ideas. I just am taking what occurs to me from the media that I read as a helpful lens, a relatively true lens, which is, I think, at one level, it's like a new version of the Nixon shock, which I learned about by reading. Trump clearly feels that we need a shock to the system. We need to repatriate industrial efforts here, and we need to balance trade deficits, and moreover, we just need a general shock to the system. I think at a larger level, ideologically, it's a rollback from globalism and our role as one of the superpowers or world leaders in globalism versus more, not exactly a isolationism, but we're one of many nations, that is.
Yeah. And are you, you have, you're known to have, I mean, you've made billions of dollars, your companies have, and I think I read somewhere that you've earned over $500 million of return of liquidity to stakeholders. Like, I mean, and you've had your ups and downs, like, you've had these great winners and losers, and it's an amazing thing. I really encourage you to go on and find out a lot more about Rafe. I'm not doing any of your background justice, but to get into more of the core of what we might share with our listeners and our watchers, you have this uncanny ability to see things 5 to 10 years out. This means for 5 to 10 years. Are you optimistic? I know it's going to be maybe a roller coaster, but what's your sense?
Well, I mean, I'm in agreement that their system has become so log jammed that common sense from any side of an aisle or any perspective or a platform or ideology, no common sense, no consensus, right actions actually have a chance of taking hold. It just seems that the system needs a shock. Whether this is the right shock or not, I don't know. I know that financialization and economics really are the driving values and driving force in our culture today. I mean, it wasn't always that way, it seems to me. So some sort of financial economic shock is required, and maybe it doesn't even matter how it's done because it's inherently destructive. Hopefully it's creative destruction in that sense, helpful destruction. I think that if it wasn't going to be an intentional act, there are all sorts of forces coming together that the shock would be unintentional, and maybe that's worse.
All right. So, and that's really encouraging, actually, that maybe to, step away from any bipartisan view and just say, hey, maybe we just needed a shock to kind of, and hopefully it'll be a creative chaos. I was on with a number of unreasonable founders, fellows, we call them, the other day, Rafe. And a lot of in this particular case, they were on the environmental side and they were quite despondent. They're really getting out. They're really feeling the pressure from to be able to go forward. Sure, what would be your insight to those founders to hang in there? Will the money find its way? Is it just paused under the chaos? What do you think's going on there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at one level, I just notice that the way Trump himself operates, it's not as it's predictable in some ways and not predictable in others. Where it is predictable is he's not committed, it seems, to any particular ideological line. He's a strategic operator and he has strategic objectives. And so I can see, who knows, tomorrow he might roll back or negotiate away tariffs for countries that are playing ball with him.
Right.
I mean, that does seem to be what he's doing strategically and is very consistent with his methodology. So getting fixated on a particular country's tariffs and how that might impact one's business or livelihood or, to me seems like it's not very fruitful to think about it in the particular. In terms of capital markets, obviously it's predictable that a certain portion of capital dries up, right? People and institutions that are very risk averse are going to be holding back investment. But I heard something yesterday about how many, hundreds of billions of dollars that Warren Buffett has ready to deploy into the chaos. I mean, so it was the best of times, it was the worst of times for both investment and investors.
Yeah. The whole Wiley Warren, right? This journey that you've been on, the very personal journey, and you've been very open in sharing your authentic kind of journey that you've been on. You've got beautiful blogs on your website that I've read them all, and
Thank you.
I want to share a couple bookend quotes. Okay.
Okay.
And they're pretty personal, and I hope you don't mind. The one is that my wife, and you were going through a bit of an existential crisis. You're doing a lot of self-reflection, and I'm sharing this for these, leaders out there that hopefully can be inspired about the peaks and the valleys that we go through. But your quote was, "My wife was downright contemptuous. You used to make money and be someone in the world, and now you spend all your time crying on Zoom calls with strangers. Plus making nerdy charts about my childhood traumas, I might add, if I were only brave enough to show her the chart." And then you have this other bookend that kind of ends maybe your final blog where you said, "What brings me the greatest joy in life, though, is when I see my boys being good teammates with one another. When I look and I see the fruits of my hard-earned skill development, I see the possibility of multi-generational rewiring. This makes my heart swell beyond words." What a beautiful bookend. You want to talk about both sides of those bookends?
Yeah, sure. What do you want to know?
I
I
want to
mean,
know how you got there, and we're trying to encourage leaders to think about being their true, authentic self, and what you learned about yourself in the journey. Because your first time you had a 10 bagger, you were like 30 years old,
right.
right? And then you've kind of been going up, and you've had this, but there were a moment there where you really took some time to do some real self-reflection. And what would be your insight advice to leaders around just staying in the moment or staying humble as they go through their journey?
Yeah. I would say that what got me there, I had the good fortune and the curse of being very successful in default society's game of achievement and making money and hopefully creating value and great experiences for a lot of people with the companies that I helped build and supported financially. It took a long time for my faults of character, my mistakes, my unconsciousness to catch up to me in the material plane. And so whatever, the harder they come, the harder they fall. So I just had a very dramatic, very normal human experience. And I think we all end up going through these types of journey cycles, maybe more than once or multiple times in our lives, where it becomes an existential matter, where we're questioning who we are um, and what our worth is, and uh, how to proceed, or in some cases, if to proceed. And so, I guess the first thing I'll say is, in my experience and my observation, my journey and the highs and the lows and the existential crises are very, very normal, natural. I don't think any of us come through unscathed in that sense, and it's just a normal part of life. So, this too shall pass is a mantra, and maybe it helps to know that we're not alone. Mentor of mine used to say, "You're not uniquely disturbed, Rafe." So we're not alone, and it helps to actually be honest, transparent, and share. The courage to be vulnerable has, in my experience, has always been the key to unlocking whatever's next and to helping me move past the blocks, and emotional and otherwise.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because, and that's one of the things with our audience that I thought it was such a rich and beautiful. You've been so open about that, and so, and I think it's a lot of the founders and the fellows out there and the people in the C-suite. It often can feel like there's this perfection kind of, I got to have all the answers, and here you are, kind of being very open about your story. What advice would you give them to stay centered on that? This courage to be authentic. And looking back, if you could impart this to your boys or to others, what would you impart?
Yeah. There's something about, it's very difficult, but it's crucial to not believe the stories that you tell yourself and that others want to tell and believe about you. If you're looked at as a leader, in my case, I think it's natural when you have leadership qualities that people want to follow. They want to sometimes put you on a pedestal, and you have to resist that. That was something that I didn't realize, or was even an issue, but I was allowing myself, encouraging others to put me on a pedestal, because it's easier, in some sense, easier for the ego to not have hard conversations if everybody just follows your lead. And it's easy, for me to convince you of what I see and what I want you to do and what I want us to do together. um, that's in some ways the easier path, but of course it's also a trap, and in the long run it's the harder path.
Yeah. This thing about, you and I talked a little bit earlier in a previous conversation, this thing about ego. What is your take on on ego, and how do you counsel your ego sitting there on your shoulder? I don't know about you, but of all I've done a lot of dumb things in my life. A lot of times my ego's gotten in the way. How do you how do you how do you manage your ego?
I feel like the ego is a real thing. It's a real part of us. It's our personality construct. It's our patterning, our habitual patterning. It's our protector and safety net. It develops in early childhood in humans and is with us our whole lives. And the question is not whether it's at play. It's always at play. The question is, can we become aware of it? And can we choose to pause and reflect, and crucially get reflections from those around us that we trust, and that we love, and they care about us, and will give us those honest reflections? And can we take that feedback, both the internal feedback from our own true emotions, our own highest ideals, and outside perspective from people we trust? Can we take all of that, and can we make conscious choices, even though those feel hard or sometimes even existential, even though it feels like, a death of some sort, or like the scariest thing possible? If we've come to a sober, rational, holistic conclusion that the way through is through, or to make that leap that feels so, so scary, or that we've been resisting, or we haven't even known that we've been resisting. If we can become aware, and we can summon the courage to make those kind of choices over and over and over and over and over again, then that's what it means to not be in thrall of our ego.
If there's one thing I was hoping would really come out of our conversation together that you could share with these other leaders, is that this idea of your investment in self-awareness has been remarkable. And I think that's a message for all of us. Like, it's a never ending, and it's not just getting a coach. It's a much deeper dive. I mean, it's a real deep dive and going and reaching out for that support and
Yeah.
thinking of it as a positive kind of a thing. I want to talk about patterns.
Okay.
I'm going to switch to patterns. You have this uncanny ability to see patterns. And my observation around leaders that do extraordinary things are very good at seeing patterns and systems.
Hmm.
What do you do to sharpen your ability to see patterns? How do you, I know part of it's maybe intuitive, but what's your advice for emerging leaders around crafting the ability to see patterns?
Well, it doesn't feel to me like I'm doing anything in particular. So there's definitely, we're all born with certain gifts and certain blind spots. And yeah, we can work on removing the blind spots or developing skills, building muscles. I don't have anything I don't think particularly, brilliant to say about that. I think it's probably more of a personal journey. But here's what I think does track and is true from my experience is that we're all born just absolutely brilliant. And a lot of times what is blocking our ability to tap into those gifts, those innate gifts, um, is the patterning in the ego and various emotional defense mechanisms and unseen. So the know thyself, right? The commitment to really honestly see where your blocks are and do our best to remove those blocks, to repattern, to unwire. We know that neurons that wire together fire together, neurons that wire apart fire apart. So it's possible throughout life to undo patterning and then have access to that innate wisdom and innate intelligence and innate brilliance and the innate humanity and heart that we all have. And so from that perspective, it's more of a matter of unlearning or undoing patterning that will allow us each to tap into our inherent vision and pattern matching ability and see clearly and be able to take the right actions.
It gives me some insight into your analysis around seeing this whole tariff crisis as a bit of a shock to the system. It's a little bit, sometimes the system needs a shock.
Well, we have individual egos and we have collective egos.
Yeah.
Another way of saying it is, worldview, totalizing worldview. It's the water that we're swimming in. It's dirty. It's foul, and so we need something to clean it up. And so I think, you know, it, where we have an existential crisis here at the collective level, right?
Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz. I'm going to switch gears to culture for a little bit, organization culture. He had a comment and wrote a book about it. I guess is that a toxic culture will kill your business. And my life is about advancing thriving cultures and to overcome toxic cultures. What's your take on what causes toxic cultures and how you advance over topic through your experience of these companies you built, the advice you've given to
Yeah.
so many people?
Well, I'll preface it by saying that this was never my superpower. In fact, it was one of my Achilles heels. It's just maybe a blind spot. It's not that I didn't want to have great cultures. I just didn't know how to be a leader in that regard. That wasn't. And so what I'm saying is kind of what I observe both in retrospect and also in looking at leaders that I admire who have built incredible cultures. Bless you.
Thank you.
I think it's a what I've seen building a great culture is a very intentional act, and if that's done first and foremost, like we say in founders circles, like ideas don't execute themselves. It takes a team, and a
Right.
team requires a good culture to be effective. And so if we come from first principles and we say, look, the values that we aspire to, that we hold ourselves accountable to, and this is so critical, and I think where a lot of leaders and teams misstep is they have these ideals, but they actually don't. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. It's
Right.
very hard to walk the walk, right? So having leaders create a culture wherein being in integrity to our ideals and our standards and our values is the main activity, and the results in the 3D results, the material results, whether that's money or product or anything else, any sort of external achievement results that are measurable in that sense. If those come secondary, if those become the consequence of a good team culture, then that's really where we want to be headed. But I'm curious because you are a culture builder and a culture person. What do you how would you answer your same question?
Well, I have a whole framework that I really deeply believe in, but the most important thing to hear from you is exactly the kind of leader that I like to work with, or we get that makes a difference. Is it's the intentionality you need to provide it. No one, like if you've got a deep background, for example, and let's say that your biggest gift is that Stanford, a brain of yours, can go and create strategy and a business model that just is a disruptor. But then
Yeah,
you're self-aware enough to get around you people that can help add to the dimension to get the best out of the people around.
yeah,
That you start to build kind of, that you're intentional about creating that culture.
yeah.
So I'm going to cover a couple of those elements because I want to get your reaction to it. I work for a CEO. We ended up creating one of the best financial institution, one of the best places to work in knowledge, financially and customer wise and people wise in this case in Canada was number one place to work in Canada. But when I said when you we had when you did an 11 autopsy on this CEO, the 10 values that we talked about would drop out of him. He so deeply believed it. It wasn't hard for him to have integrity on him because that's who he was.
Who he was.
Wouldn't make it up. He was the values. So it wasn't like he was lecturing anybody on the values all the time. He was them.
Yeah.
So if we did a loving autopsy on you, Mr. Furst, what values would tumble out that you hold dearly?
Yeah. So I love that you said that this leader is those values.
He is the value.
That's who he is. So after that severe existential crisis that I'd had 2012, let's say, a couple of years later, and this is where I was, quote unquote, according to my wife, crying in front of strangers rather than being in the world and doing stuff, right? I had become a part of an intentional community called Leap Forward, where our mission was to support one another in our personal growth journeys and its values first. And so we all agreed that we would uphold the following values as our operating system, if you will,
Yeah.
as a community and as individuals. So they are humility, care, conscious communication, integrated cooperation, coevolution, and integrity.
Awesome. I love that you can say them, anchor on them, and I love that you're starting with humility. Speaking of the Florida game, yesterday I heard one of the analysts say that it doesn't take long from becoming a peacock to becoming a feather duster. And it's a great quote around the importance of humility. But what a powerful
Yeah.
ethos to build on. And how have you found?
Well, I mean, in all humility, I cannot take credit for articulating these values.
Right.
That was my mentor, Ronit Hertzfeld, who founded Leap Forward. You know, she rightly, I think, distilled that these are universal human values.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one other element of the 10 that I really encourage leaders to put intentionality to and around in an integrated kind of a way, because it's an integrated pattern system, is this idea of finding purpose. Mission, vision have been out there for, and will always be there, and they're important. I find that an organization to deeply come and sense what its true purpose is really hard. It's really hard work.
Yeah.
And like we have a lot of these unreasonable companies that are great companies. They know what they do, and they have their business models, and their strategies pretty clear. But if you ask them what's the essence, what's the
Mm.
a lot of times they have a hard time articulating.
Yeah.
What's your take on that, and how have you come to reflect on how important deep purpose is in driving the long-term sustainable success of the business?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel it goes back to the values are who we are or who our higher selves, who we aspire to be.
Right.
And so again, if you want to be effective in the what you do, you have to know who you are, right? You
Yeah.
have to know who you are and what kinds of, and so a big part of that is what's your purpose,
What's your
right?
purpose?
And in a work context or in a business context, you could have a business purpose and that's who you are in business. It doesn't have to define you, but and you can have a different purpose with your family, for instance, with your community, but these are all aspects of who you are, right? And the more of yourself that you know about, and more of yourself that you can bring to what you do in work and your business, just the better you're going to be able to be effective in the
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of Simon Sinek, and I don't know how many people have watched his
Oh,
video
it's
online.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I don't know, 15, 20 million people or some crazy number. But the idea of recognizing that core and then getting there and being able to articulate is an anthropological exercise. It's very hard. There's a lot of digging and really to understand. It's not a weekend exercise for marketing to go away and put something together and then throw it out there.
Yeah.
And our research has found is that when people join your organization in a highly diverse kind of group of people, but when they can align with the values to their own personal values, and they can align, even though their own personal purpose and the business purpose may not be the same, but if they see alignment there, it's much easier to get up and to get involved in making a difference versus a transaction.
Of course.
It goes beyond transactional work to truly a movement of making a contribution, telling a story, creating a story, and that's pretty powerful. If you were to, so the other, a couple other elements I just want to get your reaction to is that my whole view around people first is around what I've found, all the research we've done is that the most frustrating for people is when they get wrapped up in negative friction, when they have a hard time creating value for others, when they're stuck in rules or bureaucracy or waste or they go home or whatever going home means these days at work, when they conclude and they're
Hmm.
frustrated.
Mm.
You can buy all the ping pong tables and give all the STIP and long-term incentive plans and all the perks you want. That doesn't overcome this idea that I want to do something of value, and when I can't, that I'm stuck.
Hmm.
And negative friction has really been something that I'm really encouraging organizations to look at. I'm curious of your take on what your thoughts are around eliminating negative friction.
Yeah. And so if I understand you correctly, negative friction is what keeps us from being in integrity with our purpose and our values.
It could be
Or
a process that, for example, like I literally, Rafe, I've said people say to me, Lord, I go home every day and I'm never successful. I cannot be successful.
yeah,
It
cannot be successful. What?
at creating value for others. Like
Oh,
I can't give other people good experience. It'd be like a nurse would say, you know, I would love to give my patient the best possible service, but I don't have the resources.
hmm,
I don't have the capacity. There's so much bureaucracy. There's so much things that I have to get out of the way in terms of non-value added activity that
right.
attention to giving loving care and genuine care to rape
Yeah.
gets in the way, but all this other shit that's just blocks my experience.
Yeah.
You can give me a pay raise, but that doesn't change how I feel at the end of the day when I go home.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much in there, Lauren. I feel like, there, I mean, for me, it comes back to, all right, yes, in the world, there are things that are going to be negative resistance to us being who we want to be, getting what we want to get. And so how do we operate? I mean, that's just like, and people who look at that as a half full situation, right?
Yeah,
These are the challenges I get to overcome, right?
right.
And so there's more than one way to frame it. And so, but regardless, I mean, I guess it's just starts with acknowledging, yeah, it's hard. Life is hard.
It's
Hard
hard work
being
and hard
it's hard being with other humans.
work.
But we don't really have an alternative because we're not a species that can go it alone.
That's exactly, we are not a species that can ever go it alone. I want to go to the book if you don't mind. And I encourage people to read it, and I'm going to read it. And if you were to kind of pick a couple highlights that you wanted to share with people around the future of venture capital investing, and what would be a couple of
Yeah.
highlights?
Well, from a culture perspective, I think I spent a lot of time in the book about the culture of Silicon Valley style venture capital
Yeah,
as it's practiced today, just to contextualize it, is very toxic. It's toxic for founders in most cases, not all. It's toxic for limited partner investors in venture funds, or at least it's not optimally fulfilling for them. And I don't think it really serves the venture capitalists themselves if they truly believe that they're in it to change the world through innovation and bring value to the ecosystem. I feel like maybe it's a microcosm of society in general, but there needs to be a shakeup. And so, I mean, I can get into specifics. It really is, uh, venture capital as it's practiced today is not what I call venture capital. It's not funding innovation. Many years ago, you could argue that uh, venture capital firms, venture capital funds operated more like angel investors do today, which is they're there to add capital and advice and wisdom, but allow the founders who have the vision and who are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into the operations every single day. It's to support them. And long story short, what we have is a system that has perverse incentives. It's not anybody's fault per se, but there's a cultural element
Right.
that's stuck that actually has VC firms and angel investors and private equity upstream or downstream private equity. The whole ecosystem is actually there to control and to extract value from that ecosystem.
And so it's interesting because we're back to a core value again around command and control, versus grow and innovate and
Hmm.
experiment and to get better and to advance humans. And I mean, look, none of us is bashful about the idea about no results equal no job, and making money is a good thing. The and with that is how do we do it to advance, to really bring this innovation and creativity and advance humankind?
Yeah.
We cannot go it alone.
Yeah.
And I love the work you're doing. Like, I mean, and by the way, the money you've raised for cancer and all the other kind of things you've done, Rafe, but the fact that you're investing your time now to just make, help entrepreneurs, help leaders, help founders, help to be a mentor like that. I mean, for you to stand up and to give your life to that right now and to build on all the things you learn is such a contribution. I mean, we can't go it alone. We need all of our individual beautiful views and you've got such a rich abundance of them. What if there were any kind of? I love the very fact too. Just the final thing, because again, I have this thing about part of being intentional around a great culture is have great, not perfect leaders. Like we can't be perfect, but I,
100%.
I have made a comment that people have a right to have great leaders, and leaders have a responsibility to become great, not perfect. It's a practice.
Yeah.
Do you have any, in addition to the value comment and the purpose comment, do you have any additional insight about vulnerability, I guess, courage? Any other thoughts about great, not perfect leadership?
I'm a work in progress, and I was as unconscious and destructive as anybody I've ever met, and I hit that wall, and it was a true existential crisis, and I was hospitalized, psychotic break, diagnosed bipolar. I mean, you name it. I was brought to my knees, and I still went on for a number of years thinking I could patch things together, and go back in some ways to the old ways, or in many ways to the old ways, without making fundamental changes. I came to a point, and for me, it was about my son and fatherhood, and realizing that if I didn't make a fundamental change in myself, I was going to be raising my kids in a way that I felt was damaging and I didn't want to do. And so I was not prepared to do it for myself. That came later after many years of practice. And so I guess what I would say is whatever that is, if we're not capable yet of loving, caring, and honoring ourselves enough to do it for ourselves, to making those changes, to doing the hard work, what is it? Is it your faith? Is it your children? Is it your spouse? Is it your friends, your family, whatever your ideals, your country, whatever that is, that is you feel is a greater purpose than yourself. It's important to know that the only way you're going to be able to serve that, which is higher than yourself, is through yourself, to work on yourself and commit to that hard change that feels like death at times.
What a beautiful way to end. You are a wonderful, loving man in progress. Thank you for being so honest and just sharing, because it's, there's lots of stuff, right? But it's the stuff underneath that brings us to that other level. And you are just a wonderful example. And I mean, in the most genuine way I could say it, of courageous authenticity towards advancing yourself first to advance others. And I just love the fact that I've got this privilege to get to know you. And I give you a giant hug and high five virtually if I could. Thank you for being with me.
Lauren, thank you for seeing me and valuing me so much. I appreciate that.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you,
Yeah.
it's a pleasure. Hey, final prompt of the book. Pump it up.
Oh yeah. Well, you can go on Amazon and look up my name, Rafe Furst, RAFE FURST, or you can go onto my website where some of those essays and such interviews that you were talking about are. So it's just my name, Rafe RAFE FURST.com.
Great. Buy the book. Thank you. And I hope I see you soon around the unreasonable stuff. Okay. That's all right. Take care. Thank you. Bye.